Well, look, good afternoon, everyone. We're obviously here, and I'm here to speak with you about the ex gratia payment to the family of the late Mr. Ward, and particularly his widow, Ms. Donegan. What I thought I would do, and if you'll bear with me, I'm going to speak in two parts. Firstly, to the issue of what the government has determined to do with respect to the ex gratia payment, and secondly, why we have made the decision that we have with respect to the ex gratia payment. As to what it is the government has decided, on Monday morning at State Cabinet, the Cabinet decided to approve an ex gratia payment of a total of $3.2 million to Ms. Donegan and to her 4 children. So that is an additional amount of $3 million in addition to the $200,000 interim ex gratia payment that has already been made, to a total of $3.2 million. Now, there are no substantive conditions or terms attached to the giving of that money. Particularly what I mean by that is that there is absolutely nothing which would limit Ms. Donegan from taking legal action against the state government, any of its employees or agencies, or the independent contractor G4S. Absolutely nothing that would prevent Ms. Donegan from taking such an action if she instructed her solicitors to do so. Two minor matters that attach to the receipt of the money are that it is made ex gratia, which of course legally means as a gift. There's no admission of legal liability in the giving of the money. And secondly, if it were the case that Ms. Donegan took action against the state government, its agencies or employees, and she were successful, then this amount would necessarily need to be deducted from any amount of damages that she might be awarded in that action. But otherwise there are no substantive conditions. With regards to the distribution of the monies, I can inform you that it is to be distributed as follows: $1.4 million to Ms. Nancy Donegan, $400,000 to the public trustee for Lindsay Donegan, $400,000 to the public trustee upon trust for Jeremiah Ward, $400,000 to the public trustee upon trust for Waverley Ward, and $400,000 to the public trustee upon trust for Romick Ward. So they are the 4 children that are involved in this matter. Each of them will receive a trust account to the tune of $400,000. Now, that trust is to be maintained by the public trustee, and payments may be made from that trust for the maintenance, education, advancement or benefit of the beneficiary, each of those children the beneficiary of the trust. The amount of money that will go to Ms. Donegan, $1.4 million, will be paid in effect in a lump sum to Ms. Donegan. There have been a range of discussions and negotiations that have gone on between my office and the lawyers, the Aboriginal Legal Service representing Ms. Donegan. I just state here a thank you to the Aboriginal Legal Service for their involvement in this matter and for their assistance in reaching this point where the monies can flow to Ms. Donegan and her children. With the ALS, I understand and have been advised by the ALS that arrangements have been made so that that $1.4 million that goes to Ms. Donegan, from that she intends to spend some amount to purchase an appropriate property in or about Kalgoorlie. I'm informed that after advice has been given to her, Ms. Donegan, by the ALS, Ms. Donegan also intends to make some payments to immediate family members out of that $1.4 million. I'm informed that those payments will likely total around about $110,000, but they are payments which will be made by Ms. Donegan upon advice of the ALS at her discretion to other family members. And then the residual amounts, that is minus those payments, minus any amount that is spent on a property, the ALS intends to place in a trust account with the National Australia Bank, and that is a matter that will be worked through between the ALS and Ms. Donegan herself. One other matter I would add is that the eldest child, Lindsay Donegan, as I understand, reached the age of 18 years. Given that that's the case, it may be that in the future he determines as a beneficiary of the trust that we've established to dissolve that trust with the public trustee. I've also written to the ALS in informing them of the basis upon which this money is given over. But there is an expectation on the part of the state government that if Lindsay Donegan were to dissolve that trust at some point in the future, that he would be encouraged to spend money on the purchase of a property and that any money left over, that again the ALS would treat in a way similar to what they intend to do with the money that's being paid to Ms Donegan, that is to say, put it into a trust administered by a reputable bank. So that is what is happening with the money. Again, it's a $3.2 million figure. Why is that money being paid, and why is this decision being made? This is a very difficult matter. It's obviously a tragic matter. It's a matter that the government takes enormously seriously. And let me say unequivocally here that fundamentally these monies are being made available for Ms Donegan and for her children because the previous Labor government failed to maintain and operate a prison and prisoner transport system of an appropriate enough standard that was necessary to ensure that this tragic death did not occur. And let me say that this ex gratia payment is an unequivocal and sincere apology on the part of the present Liberal National Government for the failure of the previous Labor government to maintain an appropriate prison system and prison transport system. That's what this money represents. And for all of you who have read the coroner's report, I think it's important to state here, when we say that this is an apology for a previous government's failure, what do we mean precisely by that? This is an act of contrition. It is a recognition of a failure of the previous government to maintain an appropriate standard in its prison system and its prisoner transport system. And I would say to you in summary that there are 4 pivotal failures that this money is meant to show contrition for, be an apology for. First and foremost, the failure of the previous Labor cabinet to allocate funds to replace a vehicle fleet that they were repeatedly warned was not fit for the transportation of human beings. Secondly, the failure of the previous Labor government to operate a prison transport contract of sufficient quality with appropriate monitoring, despite renewing that contract twice under the terms of the previous government, so that the contracted services were of sufficient quality to prevent such a tragedy as this occurring. Thirdly, the failure of the previous Labor government in appointing a Justice of the Peace who made a critical and hopelessly flawed decision in circumstances where he was appointed to become a Justice of the Peace without any appropriate training being administered to him. And fourthly, the failure of the previous Labor government to maintain a Department of Corrective Service of sufficient enough quality in its service delivery to ensure that the contract was properly monitored and that the vehicle fleet was properly repaired and maintained. So those are the failures for which this present government now has the responsibility to remedy, but which we also give these monies to Ms Donegan and her children in recognition and in apology for those previous failures of the Labor government. As well as being an apology, as well as meaning to show sincere remorse for what has occurred in these circumstances, there are perhaps 3 other matters that I and the Liberal National Cabinet had regard to in determining the quantum of $3.2 million. The first is we gave regard to the nature of any actions that Ms Donegan could conceivably bring against the state, its agents, its instrumentalities, its employees, and we received detailed legal advice on what that case might look like and what might be its result. Secondly, we sought submissions from Ms Donegan's legal representatives, the Aboriginal Legal Service, as to what they considered was an appropriate amount, given that an ex gratia payment is not strictly about legal liability or compensation, but it's about showing contrition, about remorse, and about apology for government failure. And let me say, without going into the details of those negotiations and conversations here, I think that what has been produced by this government is very closely aligned with what has been requested. Thirdly, I need to say to you that this payment is not about compensation in the strict legal sense. This family has suffered a terrible loss that I'm sure all of you cannot begin to imagine in terms of its effects on the family unit and the individuals involved. In determining the quantum, a great deal of weight was placed on this factor, and that is that any family that suffers a loss of this nature can never be perfectly compensated, and indeed that would be impossible for this government to do. But we have looked to a measure of what is a monetary amount which can assure that this family can live comfortably and be provided for and have a secure future in the absence of the person who previously was the leader of this family. And in determining the figure of $3.2 million, that is at the absolute upper range of any ex gratia payments that we can find that have been paid in this jurisdiction or indeed in any other common law jurisdiction. You'll obviously have a range of questions now, which I'm obviously very happy to answer.
Just on those amounts, the amounts that were in trust for the kids, that's actually coming out of the 3.2 million?
It is a total amount, if you like, to the family of 3.2 million. So yes, 1.4 to Ms Donegan, which will be allocated in the fashion that I've described, and then 400,000 to each of the children, which will be held in trust.
Did you also take into account, in considering this amount, the fact that no criminal charges are being laid?
I did, and the Liberal National Cabinet did take that into account, and that became very much part of the fact that we as a government are showing contrition and apologising for the failures of a previous government in the context that the Director of Public Prosecutions has made a decision that he could not have been successful in a criminal prosecution. And I think I said at the time when that decision was made that it is obvious that people who have been involved in this, the late Mr Ward's family, Ms Donegan, her children, they will be looking for some form of finality to the matter. And that finality, because of the decision which is outside the control of executive government, will not come through the criminal justice system. And I can understand that there's a great deal of upset and distress at that fact. What I and the government are hoping is that some form of finality can be achieved, and a sense of finality can be given to Ms Donegan and her family by virtue of this payment.
What about the issues of the extended family as well? Have you looked at those issues? I noticed that you say she's probably going to divide up something like 110,000.
Yeah.
What about the other issues they've talked about maybe doing something up in the community there, like a community centre or something like that?
There's a couple of things going on. There are some conversations that the Minister for Health and Indigenous Affairs has had with Daisy Ward about possible funding at a community level, and they're ongoing. But with respect to extended family, if I can describe it that way, if I put it in this context, there were some criticism levied that this payment took too long to arrange. It has been complicated by a range of factors, not the least of which is the way in which the money should flow to ensure the absolute utmost welfare effect is given to Ms Donegan and her children. There has only been one application for an ex gratia payment, and that has been from Ms Donegan. In these circumstances, we wanted to ensure the welfare of Ms Donegan and her children, but not be overly prescriptive in the way that the monies were given out. We take very much on face value the good work that the Aboriginal Legal Service has done with Ms Donegan. She intends, we are informed, to pay some amounts of money to extended family, but there will be a limit to that amount of money, and we are informed that will be around about $110,000. And the rest of the money, minus the purchase of the property, will go into trust. Now, we gave consideration to that in the amount of the ex gratia payment, but it remains the case that if extended family consider themselves wishing to apply for an ex gratia payment, they can do so. But I must state here that a payment in an ex gratia manner to extended family in these circumstances would be extraordinary. But nevertheless, we would give consideration to it, but it would be a very